You have been walking through your days, carrying something heavy, something unnamed. It sits beneath your ribs like a stone worn smooth by years of holding back tears. Tonight, as shadows lengthen and the world grows quiet, you feel it again. That familiar ache. That sense of being lost in your own life. The mirror reflects a face you recognize but don't quite know. Behind your eyes lives someone you've been afraid to meet, someone who remembers what you've forgotten, someone who holds the keys to rooms you locked away when the world told you they were too dangerous to enter. You've learned to smile when you're breaking, to say you're fine when your soul is screaming, to hide your true face behind the mask the world finds acceptable. But here, in this sacred darkness, the mask grows heavy. Your hands tremble as you consider setting it down. The night air carries whispers of possibility, of healing that doesn't require you to become someone else, of peace that doesn't demand you forget who you are. This is where your real journey begins, not towards some distant shore of happiness, but inward, toward the parts of yourself you've been taught to fear. Your breath slows, your shoulders drop, the day's armor begins to slide away. Piece by piece, what remains is tender and true. What remains is you, before the world taught you to be ashamed of your own heart. Chapter 1. The weight we carry. You remember being small. Remember the moment you first learned that parts of you were unacceptable. Maybe it was your anger, fierce and righteous, met with silence or punishment. Maybe it was your sensitivity, your tendency to feel everything too deeply, dismissed as weakness. Maybe it was your wild joy, your untamed laughter hushed into politeness. That day, something inside you split. You took the unacceptable parts and pushed them down into the basement of your being. You told yourself they were bad, dangerous, wrong. You built walls around them with the bricks of other people's expectations. You became the child who could be loved. But the banished parts didn't disappear. They've been living in your dreams, in your sudden flashes of rage, in your inexplicable sadness. They've been calling to you through the things that trigger you, the people who irritate you without reason, the patterns you can't seem to break. You've spent years trying to fix yourself, reading books, attending workshops, practicing gratitude, and while these brought moments of relief, the deep ache remained, because you weren't broken to begin with. You were just separated from parts of yourself that held your power. The child who was too angry learned to swallow rage until it became depression. The child who felt too much learned to feel nothing at all. The child who shone too brightly learned to dim their light so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But dimming your light didn't make you lovable. It made you lost. Tonight, you're going to find them. The abandoned parts, the shadow children, the aspects of yourself you've been running from your entire life. Not to fix them or change them, but to bring them home, to discover that what you thought was your greatest weakness might be your greatest strength. The journey inward is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of your own depth. Before you learned that love had conditions. Before you believed the lie that you had to earn your place in this world. Chapter 2. The House of Forgotten Rooms. Picture your psyche as an old house. The rooms you live in daily are well lit, familiar, safe. The living room of your public face. The kitchen of your daily routines. The bedroom where you rest your socially acceptable self. These are the rooms you show to others, the rooms you've kept clean and presentable. But there are other rooms, rooms with doors you haven't opened in years. Behind one door lives the child who raged against injustice, whose anger was so pure it frightened the adults around them. Behind another waits the dreamer who once believed they could change the world, silenced by voices that called them naive. There's a room where your wild creativity dwells, locked away after someone called your art silly, your ideas impractical. A room where your deep intuition lives, dismissed as just feelings by a world that worships only logic. A room where your capacity for profound love waits, hidden after your heart was broken by those who couldn't match your depth. These rooms have grown dusty in the darkness. Cobwebs of old shame hang in the corners. The floorboards creak with the weight of unspoken words. But listen carefully. Do you hear that? It's the sound of life stirring in the shadows. Your exiled parts are still alive, still waiting, still hoping you'll come home to them. You've been afraid to open these doors because you believe what you'll find there will overwhelm you. That if you let your anger out, you'll become a monster. If you acknowledge your pain, you'll drown in it. If you embrace your wildness, you'll lose control completely. But these fears were planted by those who were afraid of their own depths. Your anger isn't rage. It's your inner fire, your passion for justice, your refusal to accept what isn't right. Your pain isn't weakness. It's your capacity for deep feeling, your ability to empathize, your proof that you're fully alive. Your wildness isn't chaos. It's your creative force, your authentic self, your refusal to be tamed into meaninglessness. Each locked room contains not a monster, but a gift. Not a flaw to be fixed, but a power to be reclaimed. The very things you've been most ashamed of are the keys to your freedom. They're waiting for you to stop running and start listening, to stop rejecting and start integrating. The house of your soul is bigger than you remember, richer than you've allowed yourself to believe. You are not the small, acceptable version of yourself you've been performing for so long. You are vast, complex, contradictory, beautifully, messily human. Chapter 3. The Language of Dreams. Every night, as you slip into sleep, your unconscious mind begins to speak. It speaks in symbols and stories, in images that bypass your rational defenses. Your dreams are not random firing of neurons. They are letters from the parts of yourself you've forgotten how to hear. That recurring dream where you're searching for something you can't name. Your psyche showing you the quest you're really on. The dreams where you're back in your childhood home. But the rooms are different. Your mind revealing how your past still lives within you, transformed but present. The dreams where you can fly, or where you're naked in public, or where someone you love has died. All of them carrying messages about freedom, vulnerability, and transformation. You've been taught to dismiss dreams as meaningless, but they are anything but. They are your inner wisdom speaking in the only language it knows. They are your shadow self trying to communicate with your conscious mind. They are invitations to remember what you've forgotten about who you really are. In your dreams, the rules of ordinary reality don't apply. The businessman dreams he's a wild wolf. The gentle mother dreams she's a fierce warrior. The quiet introvert dreams they're standing on a stage, commanding attention. These aren't random fantasies. They're glimpses of the selves you've buried beneath social expectations. Your psyche is constantly trying to achieve balance. If you've become too rigid in your waking life, your dreams will be chaotic. If you've become too passive, you'll dream of power. If you've denied your sexuality, it will emerge in your sleep. If you've suppressed your creativity, it will paint itself across your dream canvas in vivid colors. But you don't have to wait for sleep to access this wisdom. Throughout your day, pay attention to what captures your imagination. The story that makes you weep. The song that stops you in your tracks. The stranger whose face haunts you. These are all messages from your unconscious, trying to show you something about yourself you need to see. The images that disturb you most are often the ones carrying the most important information. The shadow figure chasing you in dreams isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to deliver something you need. The dark water you're afraid to enter isn't meant to drown you. It's meant to cleanse you. The monster in your nightmare isn't your enemy. It's your unrealized power, waiting for you to claim it. Chapter 4. The child who remembers. Deep within you lives a child who remembers everything, not just the facts of your early years, but the feeling of them, the wonder, the terror, the pure, unfiltered experience of being alive in a body too small to contain such a vast soul. This inner child holds your original blueprint. Before the world taught you who to be, you knew who you were. You knew what made you laugh until your belly hurt. You knew what sparked your curiosity. You knew how to love without conditions, how to trust without guarantees, how to be present without trying. But you also knew pain in ways your young mind couldn't process. You experienced rejection and felt it as evidence of your unworthiness. You witnessed cruelty and absorbed it as truth about the world. You were hurt by those who were supposed to protect you and learned that love was conditional, unsafe, something that could be withdrawn without warning. To survive, you adapted. You became who you needed to be to get love, attention, safety. If your family valued achievement, you became the overachiever. If they feared emotional expression, you became emotionally controlled. If they were chaotic, you became hyper-responsible. If they were absent, you became invisible. These adaptations served you once. They kept you alive, kept you connected, kept you functioning in a world that wasn't always kind to sensitive souls. But what serves you at 7 doesn't serve you at 37. The strategies that protected your child heart now imprison your adult self. Your inner child hasn't disappeared. They've been waiting, sometimes patiently, sometimes desperately, for you to return. They hold not just your wounds, but your gifts, your capacity for wonder, your ability to play, your natural creativity, your instinctive knowing of what feels right and what feels wrong. Healing isn't about fixing your inner child. It's about listening to them, acknowledging their pain without trying to make it go away. celebrating their joy without trying to contain it, letting them feel what they feel without judgment or urgency to change anything. When you were small, you made sense of your pain the only way you could. You decided it was your fault. You believed you weren't good enough, smart enough, lovable enough. These weren't facts. They were the desperate conclusions of a child's mind trying to maintain some sense of control in an unpredictable world. Chapter 5. The Shadow's Gift. There is a part of you that you've spent your whole life running from. It's the part that holds everything you've decided is unacceptable about yourself. Your selfishness, your jealousy, your capacity for cruelty, your sexual desires, your hunger for power, your willingness to lie when the truth is inconvenient. You've tried to be good, to be kind, to be the person others need you to be. And in doing so, you've created what some call the shadow, the repository of all the human impulses you've rejected, denied, pushed away. You tell yourself these parts don't exist, but they do. They show up in your dreams, in your sudden flashes of judgment toward others, in the qualities that irritate you most in people around you. What you hate in others often lives within you. The person whose arrogance enrages you carries a mirror to your own unacknowledged pride. The one whose neediness exhausts you reflects your own denied vulnerability. The individual whose selfishness appalls you shows you the part of yourself you've buried beneath endless self-sacrifice. This isn't a flaw in your character. It's a feature of being human. You cannot have light without shadow. You cannot be fully good without acknowledging your capacity for what you consider bad. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow, but to integrate it, to own it, to find the wisdom it carries. Your anger, which you've learned to see as ugly, contains your passion for justice. Your selfishness holds your healthy instinct for self-preservation. Your jealousy reveals what you truly want. Your capacity for cruelty, acknowledged and contained, becomes your ability to set necessary boundaries. Your sexual desires, honored rather than shamed, become part of your creative life force. The shadow doesn't want to take over your life. It wants to be acknowledged, to be seen, to stop being the thing you're constantly defending against. When you stop fighting it, it stops fighting you. When you stop rejecting it, it stops sabotaging you. When you bring it into the light of consciousness, it transforms from enemy to ally. This doesn't mean acting on every impulse. It means acknowledging every part of yourself, with honesty and compassion. It means recognizing that you are capable of both tremendous love and terrible harm, and choosing love not from denial of your shadow, but from full awareness of your complexity. The most dangerous people are not those who know their darkness, but those who refuse to see it. They act it out unconsciously, convinced of their own righteousness, even as they cause harm. The most trustworthy people are those who have looked into their own abyss and chosen to be conscious of what they find there. Chapter 6. The Wounded Healer. You didn't choose your wounds, but you can choose what to do with them. Every painful experience has carved something out of you, but it has also carved something into you. Depth, compassion, understanding, the ability to sit with pain without needing to fix it immediately. Your deepest wounds have become your greatest teachers. The betrayal that shattered your ability to trust also taught you to trust more carefully, more wisely. The loss that broke your heart also broke it open, making room for a love that's more real than what you had before. The failure that destroyed your confidence also destroyed your need to be perfect, freeing you to be human. This is the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who has been broken and, in healing themselves, learns to help others heal, not by having all the answers, but by having walked through the questions, not by being fixed, but by being real about the ongoing process of becoming whole. Your pain has given you gifts you couldn't have received any other way. Empathy that goes beyond sympathy. Strength that's been tested by fire. Wisdom that comes not from books, but from lived experience. Compassion that extends even to those who have caused harm, because you know how it feels to be lost in your own darkness. But you don't have to be grateful for your trauma. You don't have to pretend it was all worth it, or that everything happens for a reason. Some things happen for no reason at all, except that life is sometimes cruel and random and unfair. What you can be grateful for is your resilience, your ability to survive, your refusal to let pain have the final word about who you are. The wounded healer doesn't heal by forgetting their wounds or transcending them. They heal by integrating them, by letting their scars become part of their beauty, by using their broken places as sources of light for others who are still walking through darkness. You are not broken. You are not damaged goods. You are not too much or not enough. You are someone who has experienced the full range of human experience and survived. Someone who has looked into the abyss and found that you are deeper than anything that has happened to you. Your wounds don't disqualify you from love, success, or happiness. They qualify you for a deeper, more authentic version of all these things. They make you real in a world full of performances. They make you wise in a world full of information. They make you human in a world that often forgets what that means. Chapter 7. The Return to Wholeness. There is a moment in every hero's journey when they must return home, not to the place they left, but to themselves. Not as the person they were, but as who they've become through their trials and transformations. You are approaching that moment now. You've been on a long journey away from yourself, away from the child who knew their own worth without question, away from the teenager who believed they could change the world, away from the young adult who trusted their own instincts. You left home to meet the world's expectations, to earn love, to find safety in conformity. But the world's expectations were never meant to be your permanent address. They were a temporary shelter while you learned what you needed to learn. Now you've learned it. You've learned that love based on performance isn't really love. You've learned that safety based on hiding isn't really safety. You've learned that acceptance based on denial of your truth isn't really acceptance. The return journey is different from the one that took you away. It's not about going backwards. It's about spiraling deeper, taking everything you've learned about how to survive in the world and integrating it with everything you knew about how to thrive as yourself. You're not going back to naive innocence. You're moving forward to conscious wholeness. You're not erasing your experience. You're weaving it into wisdom. You're not rejecting what you've learned about the world. You're choosing how much of it serves your authentic self. This is what it means to individuate, to become who you really are rather than who you think you should be, to stop looking outside yourself for validation and start trusting your own inner compass, to stop trying to fit into boxes that were never made for someone like you. The process isn't comfortable. Growth never is. You'll feel like you're disappointing people who were attached to your old way of being. You'll question whether you're being selfish, ungrateful, unrealistic. You'll wonder if you're making a terrible mistake by choosing authenticity over approval, but gradually something shifts. The exhaustion of performing begins to lift. The anxiety of constantly monitoring yourself starts to ease. The depression that comes from living someone else's life begins to clear. In their place comes something you might have forgotten existed, a sense of coming home to yourself. Chapter 8. The Great Mystery. As famous depth psychologist once observed, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung understood something that modern life often forgets, that we are not just the small, conscious ego we think we are. We are vast, complex beings with depths that we've barely begun to explore. Most of your life has been directed by forces you're not aware of, by patterns inherited from your family, by beliefs absorbed from your culture, by reactions formed in childhood, by impulses arising from the parts of yourself you've never acknowledged. You've been calling this fate, but it's really just unconsciousness. Jung saw that the goal of human development isn't happiness in the conventional sense. It's wholeness, the integration of all the disparate parts of yourself into a conscious, unified being. This doesn't mean perfection. It means authenticity. It means owning all of who you are, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and foolishness. He called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming who you really are, rather than who others need you to be. It's not a selfish process, though it may look that way from the outside. When you become truly yourself, you have something real to offer the world. When you're just performing a role, you're giving people a hollow gift. The individual who has done this work of self-integration doesn't need to project their unwanted qualities onto others. They don't need to make others carry their disowned parts. They don't need to control or manipulate or people please, because they're not at war with themselves anymore. Jung also spoke of what he called the collective unconscious, the shared inheritance of human experience that we all carry, the universal patterns and stories that repeat across cultures and centuries. You are not just healing yourself, you're participating in the healing of these ancient wounds that humanity carries. Your journey toward wholeness contributes to the wholeness of the world. Every person who stops running from their shadow makes it easier for others to face theirs. Every individual who integrates their pain makes it less likely that pain will be passed on to the next generation. Every human who chooses consciousness over unconsciousness helps tip the balance toward a more aware world. This work is sacred work, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Not because it guarantees a life without pain, but because it promises a life with meaning. Not because it makes you special, but because it makes you human in the fullest sense of that word. Chapter 9. The Night Sea Journey. There is an ancient myth that appears in cultures around the world. The hero is swallowed by a great whale or monster and must journey through its dark belly before being reborn. Jonas and the whale, the belly of the beast, the night sea journey. It's the story of death and rebirth, of descent and return, of the necessary darkness that precedes new life. You are in that belly now. You have been swallowed by your own depths, pulled down into the ocean of your unconscious, surrounded by the darkness you've been avoiding your whole life. It feels like death because, in a way, it is. The death of who you thought you were, the death of the story you've been telling yourself about your life. But this death is not an ending. It's a transformation. In the darkness of the whale's belly, in the depths of your own psyche, something new is being born. A self that's more real than the one you've been performing. A life that's more true than the one you've been living. A story that's more honest than the one you've been telling. The journey through the darkness is disorienting. You lose your landmarks, your sense of direction, your certainty about who you are and what you want. This is not a mistake. This is necessary. You cannot find your true north until you've lost your false north. You cannot discover your authentic path until you've admitted you've been walking someone else's. In the belly of your own transformation, you meet all the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Your rage, raw and righteous. Your grief, deep and ancient. Your fear, honest and vulnerable. Your longing, desperate and beautiful. These are not your enemies. They are your teachers, your guides, your lost children coming home. The darkness speaks to you in symbols and sensations, in dreams that make no logical sense but perfect emotional sense, in body symptoms that carry messages your mind can't hear, in attractions and aversions that reveal the shape of your soul, in synchronicities that remind you that you're part of something larger than your individual story. This is the shamanic journey, the mystical descent, the dark night of the soul. It's been happening to humans for as long as humans have existed. You are not losing your mind. You are finding your soul. You are not falling apart. You are falling together in a new configuration that can hold more of who you really are. The journey through the whale's belly takes as long as it takes. You cannot rush it with positive thinking or spiritual practices or therapeutic techniques. Though all of these may help, you cannot force your way out. You can only surrender to the process, trust the darkness, believe that this descent is leading somewhere necessary and true. Chapter 10. The Wounded King. There is an old story about a king whose wound would not heal. His land became barren, his people suffered, and no amount of power or wealth could cure what ailed him. The kingdom's fertility was tied to the king's wholeness, and he could not be whole while he denied his wound, while he pretended to be invulnerable, while he tried to lead from strength alone. You have been living as the wounded king, trying to rule your life from a place of imagined invincibility, trying to be strong enough, good enough, successful enough to overcome whatever is broken within you. But the wound doesn't heal through denial. The kingdom doesn't flourish through performance. The people don't thrive when their leader is pretending to be something they're not. Your wound might be abandonment, the ache of never feeling truly wanted. Your wound might be betrayal, the scar of trust shattered by those who should have protected it. Your wound might be shame, the deep belief that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Your wound might be powerlessness, the memory of being small and helpless in the face of forces beyond your control. Whatever your wound, you've built your life around it. You've created strategies to avoid it, defenses to protect it, stories to explain it away. You've become the person who would never be abandoned again, never be betrayed again, never be shamed again, never be powerless again. But in protecting the wound, you've protected it from healing. The healing comes not from strength, but from vulnerability. Not from having all the answers, but from being willing to live the questions. Not from fixing yourself, but from accepting yourself as a beautifully imperfect work in progress. The wounded king heals by acknowledging the wound, by letting it be seen, by discovering that his vulnerability is not his weakness, but his humanity. When you stop trying to be the invulnerable king and start being the authentic human, something shifts in your kingdom. Your relationships become more real because you're more real. Your work becomes more meaningful because it comes from your truth rather than your performance. Your life becomes more alive because you're not spending all your energy maintaining a facade. The wound becomes a source of wisdom rather than shame, a place of connection rather than isolation, a doorway to depth rather than a wall against it. This doesn't mean the wound stops hurting. It means the hurt becomes part of your strength, part of your compassion, part of what makes you real in a world full of pretending. You are both the wounded king and the healing king, both the broken one and the one who is becoming whole, both the human who suffers and the human who loves. This is not contradiction. This is completeness. This is what it means to be fully alive. Chapter 11. The Sacred Marriage. Within you lives a cosmic wedding waiting to happen, not between you and another person, but between the different aspects of yourself. The marriage of your masculine and feminine energies, your strength and softness, your doing and being, your outer achievements and inner wisdom, your solar consciousness and lunar intuition. You've been taught that some qualities are better than others, that strength is better than vulnerability, that thinking is better than feeling, that independence is better than interdependence, that achieving is better than receiving. But these teachings have split you in half, leaving you imbalanced and incomplete. Your masculine energy is not about gender. It's about focus, direction, decision-making, boundaries, action. Your feminine energy is about receptivity, intuition, flowing, connecting, being. You need both. A river without banks becomes a flood. Banks without water become a desert. You are designed to be both river and banks, water and container, flow and form. Perhaps you've overdeveloped your masculine side. You're great at doing, but terrible at being, excellent at achieving, but awful at receiving, strong at independence, but weak at asking for help. You've conquered the outer world, but neglected your inner landscape. You're successful, but not satisfied, powerful, but not peaceful. Or perhaps you've overdeveloped your feminine side. You're wonderful at feeling, but struggle with boundaries. Beautiful at connecting, but terrible at protecting yourself. Gifted at intuition, but challenged by practical decision-making. You're loved by others, but don't know how to love yourself with fierce protectiveness. The sacred marriage is about integrating these complementary energies within yourself. It's about becoming whole rather than half, complete rather than fragmented, balanced rather than extreme. This isn't about becoming neutral or gray. It's about becoming fully colorful, able to access the full spectrum of human capacity. When this inner marriage begins to happen, your outer relationships change. You stop looking for someone else to complete you because you're becoming complete within yourself. You stop projecting your disowned qualities onto others because you're owning them yourself. You stop trying to control others because you're learning to work with your own inner dynamics. This integration doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of recognizing when you're out of balance and making adjustments, of noticing when you're all doing and no being, all giving and no receiving, all strength and no softness, of learning to be both warrior and lover, both creator and destroyer, both teacher and student. The sacred marriage is consummated not in perfection, but in conscious relationship with all parts of yourself, in honoring both your need for solitude and connection, in expressing both your power and your vulnerability, in being both the lover and the beloved of your own life. Chapter 12. The Wisdom of Suffering. You have been taught that suffering is a mistake, something to be avoided, medicated, transcended, fixed. You've been promised that the right therapy, the right practice, the right mindset will eliminate your pain and deliver you to a place of permanent happiness. But this promise is both false and harmful. Suffering is not a bug in the human system. It's a feature. It's how you grow, how you deepen, how you develop compassion, how you discover what really matters. It's the fire that burns away what is false and reveals what is true. It's the pressure that turns coal into diamonds, irritation into pearls, struggles into strength. This doesn't mean you should seek suffering or that all suffering is meaningful. Some pain is senseless, random, cruel. Some trauma serves no purpose except to destroy. But the pain you cannot avoid, the suffering that life hands you, despite your best efforts to dodge it, this has the potential to become your teacher if you let it. Your suffering has carved you into who you are. The heartbreak that taught you how precious love really is. The failure that showed you that your worth isn't dependent on your achievements. The loss that revealed what you truly value. The illness that made you grateful for simple health. The depression that forced you to examine what was depression in your life. Each wave of pain that has crashed over you has worn away a little more of what was false about your life. Each crisis has shown you what is solid enough to survive the storm. Each wound has become a place where light can enter, where wisdom can grow, where compassion can be born. The goal is not to eliminate suffering, but to transform your relationship with it, to stop running from it, fighting it, denying it, spiritualizing it away, to learn to be present with pain without being overwhelmed by it, to discover that you are larger than your suffering, deeper than your wounds, more resilient than your breaks. When you stop being afraid of pain, it stops controlling your life. When you stop seeing it as evidence that something is wrong with you, it becomes information about what needs attention. When you stop trying to fix it immediately, it can teach you what it came to teach. When you learn to suffer consciously, suffering becomes a doorway rather than a wall. This is the wisdom that can only be learned through experience, the knowledge that comes not from books, but from being broken and choosing to heal, from being lost and finding your way, from being afraid and acting anyway. It's the wisdom of the human heart that has been tested by life and found that it can love even in the midst of loss, hope even in the face of despair, continue even when it wants to give up. Chapter 13. The Art of Letting Go. You have been holding on so tightly to control, to certainty, to the way things used to be, to who you used to be, to relationships that have outgrown their form, to dreams that no longer serve your soul's evolution, to versions of yourself that feel safe but small. Your hands are cramped from gripping, your heart exhausted from resisting the natural flow of change. Letting go is not giving up. It's not resignation or defeat or spiritual bypassing. It's recognition that some things are meant to be held lightly, like water or wind or sunlight. That some experiences are meant to flow through you rather than be grasped by you. That some chapters are meant to end so new ones can begin. You've been afraid that letting go means losing something important. But what if the opposite is true? What if holding on so tightly is what's keeping you from receiving what's trying to come? What if your need to control is blocking the very thing you're trying to create? What if your resistance to change is preventing your growth? Consider the tree that holds its leaves too long. Instead of the graceful autumn letting go that allows for spring renewal, it becomes brittle, breakable, stuck in a season that has passed. The leaves that could have become compost for new growth instead become dead weight that makes the tree vulnerable to storms. You, too, have dead leaves you're holding on to, grudges that no longer serve any purpose except to keep old wounds fresh, identities that once fit but now feel like outgrown clothes, expectations that were never realistic to begin with, stories about yourself that limit rather than liberate, relationships that exist more in your mind than in reality. Letting go is a practice, not a one-time event. It's something you do moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. It's the daily decision to release your grip on how things should be and open your hands to what is. It's the ongoing process of distinguishing between what you can influence and what you cannot, what is yours to carry and what belongs to others. Sometimes letting go feels like death because it is a kind of death. the death of who you thought you were, the death of how you thought your life would unfold, the death of people you loved, staying in forms you could recognize. But every death in nature is followed by rebirth. Every ending creates space for a beginning. Every release allows for a renewal. The art is learning to let go with grace rather than being forced to let go through crises. To release consciously rather than having life pry your fingers open through loss. To choose change before change chooses you. To dance with impermanence rather than fight it. Chapter 14. The Return of the Exiled One. There is someone who has been waiting for you in the shadows of your psyche. Someone you banished long ago when the world convinced you they were too dangerous to house, too wild, too sensitive, too angry, too needy, too much. They've been living in exile, growing stronger in the darkness, calling to you through your dreams and your symptoms and your longings. This exiled one might be the artist you gave up to be practical, the mystic you abandoned to be rational, the lover you rejected to be safe, the rebel you silenced to be accepted, the child you grew up too fast to protect. They carry the parts of your soul that were too precious for this harsh world, so you hid them away until it was safe to bring them home. But the world will never be completely safe for your full self. Safety is not something you find out there. It's something you create in here, in the sanctuary of your own self-acceptance. It's the decision to welcome home the parts of yourself you've been ashamed of, afraid of, apologetic about. Your exiled one has gifts for you. The artist brings your creativity, your ability to see beauty in unexpected places, your talent for making something from nothing. The mystic offers your intuition, your connection to the sacred, your ability to sense what cannot be seen. The lover presents your capacity for deep feeling, passionate engagement, intimate connection. The rebel contributes your refusal to accept what isn't right, your willingness to stand up for truth, your commitment to authentic living. The child delivers your wonder, your playfulness, your ability to be present in the moment without agenda. These are not weaknesses to be managed. They are strengths to be integrated. The process of bringing the exiled one home is tender work. They've been hurt by your rejection of them. They don't trust that you really want them back. They've learned to survive in the shadows and may be afraid of the light. You must court them gently, with patience and consistency. You must prove through your actions, not just your words, that you're ready to honor what they bring. This means making space for their expression in your daily life. If you've exiled your artist, you must pick up the paintbrush, the pen, the instrument you put down when someone told you that you weren't good enough. If you've banished your mystic, you must create time for silence, for nature, for the practices that connect you to something larger than yourself. If you've rejected your lover, you must open your heart again to beauty, to passion, to the full spectrum of feeling that makes life worth living. If you've silenced your rebel, you must start saying no to what doesn't serve you, and yes to what calls to your soul. If you've abandoned your child, you must remember how to play, how to wonder, how to approach life with fresh eyes. The return of the exiled one doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or chaotic. Means becoming whole. It means integrating these vital aspects of yourself in conscious, mature ways. The artist creates not to escape responsibility, but to fulfill it. The mystic seeks not to avoid the world, but to serve it better. The lover opens not to be vulnerable to harm, but to be available to connection. When you welcome home your exiled parts, you stop being a fragment of yourself performing as a whole person. You become an actual whole person, complex and contradictory, and beautifully human. You stop needing others to carry the qualities you've disowned. You stop projecting your unlived life onto others and start living it yourself. The world needs your exiled one. It needs your particular brand of creativity, your unique spiritual perspective, your specific way of loving, your individual form of rebellion, your own expression of wonder. These qualities were never meant to be hidden. They were meant to be shared, but only after they've been owned, integrated, and consciously expressed. Chapter 15. The Dance of Opposites. You are not a simple being. You are a walking contradiction, a living paradox, a dance of opposites held in the tender container of your human form. You are both strong and vulnerable, wise and foolish, loving and selfish, light and shadow. This is not a problem to be solved. This is the nature of being human. You've been taught to resolve your contradictions, to choose sides, to be consistent, to be either confident or humble, not both. To be either independent or interdependent, not both. To be either rational or emotional, not both. But this either-or thinking diminishes your fullness, flattens your complexity, reduces your humanity to a cartoon of itself. The wisdom traditions understand something that modern psychology is just beginning to remember, that wholeness includes all of your parts, even the ones that seem to contradict each other, that you can be both a mystic and a pragmatist, both a warrior and a peacemaker, both a parent and a child, both a teacher and a student. Your anger and your compassion are not enemies. They are dance partners. Your anger protects what your compassion loves. Your compassion softens what your anger defends. Together, they create the fierce love that can both hold and fight for what matters. Your strength and your vulnerability are not opposites, they are allies. Your strength gives you the courage to be vulnerable. Your vulnerability gives your strength its direction and meaning. Together, they create the authentic power that can both protect and connect. Your masculine and feminine energies are not in competition. They are in collaboration. Your masculine focus gives your feminine intuition a way to manifest. Your feminine receptivity gives your masculine drive something worth achieving. Together, they create the wholeness that can both create and nurture what you bring into being. Learning to hold paradox is one of the most important skills you can develop. It's the ability to be both accepting and discerning, both trusting and cautious, both open and boundaried. It's the wisdom to know that life is not black and white, but every shade of gray, and sometimes colors that have no names. When you embrace your contradictions instead of trying to resolve them, you become more interesting to yourself and others, more flexible in your responses to life's complexity, more tolerant of the contradictions in others, more able to navigate the gray areas where most of life actually happens. This doesn't mean being wishy-washy or uncommitted. It means being large enough to hold multiple truths simultaneously, committed enough to your growth to let yourself be complicated, honest enough about your humanity to stop pretending you're simple. The dance of opposites is not chaos, it's complexity. It's the rich, nuanced, multifaceted expression of a soul that refuses to be reduced to a single note. You are a symphony, not a solo, an orchestra, not an instrument, a library, not a single book. Embrace your contradictions. They are where your uniqueness lives. Chapter 16. The Ancient Wound. Beneath all your personal wounds lies an ancient wound that belongs not just to you, but to humanity itself. It's the wound of separation, the primal cut that happened when consciousness emerged and humans began to experience themselves as separate from nature, from each other, from the divine, from themselves. This is the wound that drives your feeling of never quite belonging anywhere, the sense that you're missing something essential, that there's a happiness or peace or completion that others seem to have that you cannot access. The feeling that you're exiled from some garden, some home, some wholeness that you dimly remember but cannot find. Every personal wound is connected to this ancient one. Your abandonment wound echoes the species' sense of being abandoned by the divine. Your betrayal wound reflects humanity's loss of trust in the benevolence of existence. Your shame wound mirrors the collective guilt about our separation from our original innocence. Your powerlessness wound connects to our species' terror of being small and mortal in a vast and impersonal universe. You cannot heal your personal wounds completely without acknowledging their connection to this larger story. You are not just healing yourself, you are healing something in the collective human psyche. Every time you choose love over fear, connection over separation, consciousness over unconsciousness, you are stitching back together something that was torn long ago. The ancient wound is also an ancient gift. The same consciousness that created the sense of separation also created the possibility for conscious reunion. The same awareness that brought the feeling of exile also brought the capacity for return. The same development that led to the wound also holds the potential for healing. You are living at a unique time in human history when this healing is possible on a scale never before imagined. When the tools for consciousness, the understanding of psychology, the wisdom of diverse traditions are all available in ways they have never been, when individuals can do the work of integration and wholeness that was once the privilege of a few. Your personal healing journey is part of a larger healing that is happening in human consciousness. Your choice to face your shadow contributes to the collective facing of our species' shadow. Your integration of your wounded and healed parts helps the world integrate its own broken and beautiful aspects. This doesn't make your personal pain less real or less important. It makes it more meaningful. It connects your individual suffering to the larger story of what it means to be human. It gives your healing journey a purpose beyond your own happiness. It makes you a participant in the largest story there is, the story of consciousness awakening to itself. Chapter 17. The Midlife Crossing. There comes a time in every life when the strategies that got you this far stop working, when the dreams you've been pursuing feel hollow, when the identity you've built feels like a costume you're tired of wearing, when the life you've created feels like someone else's life that you've been living by mistake. This is what some call the midlife crisis. But crisis is too small a word for what's actually happening. This is the midlife crossing. The passage from the first half of life, which is about establishing yourself in the world, to the second half, which is about discovering who you really are beneath all the roles and achievements and expectations. In the first half of life, your task was to build ego strong enough to function in the world, to develop skills, create relationships, achieve goals, accumulate resources, establish your place in the social order. This was necessary work. You couldn't skip it or transcend it. You had to do it to become a functional adult. But if you stop there, if you never move beyond the ego's agenda, you begin to die spiritually long before you die physically. You become successful but not satisfied, accomplished but not authentic, respected but not real. You have everything you thought you wanted, but feel empty inside. The midlife crossing is an invitation to start the second half of your journey, to move from ego to soul, from external validation to internal authority, from having to being, from achieving to becoming. This doesn't mean abandoning everything you've built. It means building it on a different foundation. The crossing is often precipitated by crisis, divorce, death, illness, job loss, depression, addiction. Something happens that shatters your illusion of control and forces you to question everything you thought you knew about yourself and your life. But the crisis is not the enemy. It's the catalyst. It's life breaking you open so something new can be born. The crossing requires you to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be and start discovering who you actually are. To release your attachment to how you thought your life should look and start paying attention to how it wants to unfold. To stop asking what others expect of you and start asking what your soul is calling you toward. This is not a comfortable process. It involves grief for the life you're leaving behind, even if it wasn't fully satisfying. It involves uncertainty about who you're becoming. It involves the courage to disappoint people who were attached to your old way of being. It involves the faith to step into unknown territory without a map. But on the other side of the crossing is something precious, an authentic life, a life that's yours, not someone else's idea of what your life should be. A life that reflects your deepest values, expresses your true nature, serves your soul's purpose. A life that feels real from the inside, regardless of how it looks from the outside. The midlife crossing is not just about personal transformation. It's about becoming an elder in the truest sense. someone who has done the work of growing up and can now help others do the same, someone who has faced their own depths and can companion others on their journey inward, someone who has learned to live authentically and can model that possibility for those still caught in performance. Chapter 18. The Sacred Ordinary. You have been looking for the sacred in all the wrong places, in peak experiences and spiritual highs and transcendent moments that lift you out of ordinary reality. But the sacred was never hiding in the extraordinary. It was always right here in the midst of your regular life, waiting for you to have eyes to see it. The sacred is in your morning coffee, if you drink it with presence instead of rushing toward your next task. It's in the conversation with your checkout clerk, if you see them as a fellow human being instead of a functionary. It's in the way light falls across your kitchen table, if you pause long enough to notice beauty in the mundane. You've been taught that spiritual life happens in special places at special times with special practices. But your kitchen is a temple if you cook with love. Your commute is a pilgrimage if you travel with awareness. Your work is ministry if you approach it as service. Your relationships are sacraments if you encounter others as sacred beings. This doesn't mean becoming religious in any conventional sense. It means becoming awake to the holiness that permeates ordinary reality. It means recognizing that every moment is potentially sacred, every encounter potentially transformative, every experience potentially revelatory. The mystics of all traditions have pointed to this truth, that the divine is not separate from the world, but intimately woven into it, that you don't need to leave your life to find the sacred. You need to enter your life more fully. You need to show up with more presence, more attention, more reverence for what is actually here. Your spiritual practice is not separate from your daily life. It is your daily life approached with consciousness. The way you treat your body is spiritual practice. The way you speak to your family is spiritual practice. The way you handle stress, conflict, disappointment, joy is all spiritual practice. This shifts everything. You stop waiting for your real life to begin somewhere else someday when conditions are perfect. You start living your real life right here, right now, in whatever circumstances you find yourself. You stop seeking escape from the human condition and start finding the sacred within it. The sacred ordinary doesn't eliminate suffering or make everything easy. It makes everything meaningful. It infuses your daily experience with depth, purpose, connection to something larger than yourself. It reminds you that you are not just getting through your life. You are participating in the mystery of existence itself. When you begin to see your life as sacred, you treat it differently. You make different choices. You prioritize differently. You speak differently. You love differently. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you're awake to what's already spiritual about being human. Chapter 19. The Ancestors. Wisdom. You are not the first to walk this path of awakening. Behind you stretches an endless line of ancestors who faced their own darkness, integrated their own shadows, found their own ways home to themselves. Their wisdom lives in your DNA, in your dreams, in the archetypal patterns that shape your journey. Some of these ancestors are literal, your grandparents and great-grandparents who survived wars, depressions, migrations, losses that would have broken lesser spirits, who found ways to love despite heartbreak, to hope despite devastation, to continue despite wanting to give up. Their resilience flows in your veins. Others are spiritual ancestors, the mystics and sages and wisdom keepers who map the territory of consciousness you're now exploring, who left guideposts in their writings, their teachings, their very lives, who remind you that the path of individuation, though lonely, is not unprecedented. Carl Jung himself was drawing on wisdom traditions that stretch back thousands of years. The Greek understanding of shadow and persona, the Eastern recognition of the illusory nature of the separate self, the shamanic journey into the underworld of the psyche, the alchemical process of transforming lead into gold, base consciousness into integrated awareness. You are part of this ancient lineage of seekers, of humans who refused to live unconsciously, who insisted on awakening, who chose the difficult path of growth over the easy path of sleep, who understood that becoming fully human requires facing everything human within yourself. Their struggles are your struggles. Their victories are your inheritance. Their wisdom is your birthright. When you feel alone in your process, remember that you are accompanied by countless souls who have walked similar paths. When you feel lost, remember that others have found their way through similar territory. When you feel afraid, remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to proceed despite it. But you are not just receiving from your ancestors. You are also giving to your descendants. Every step you take toward the consciousness, every integration you achieve, every healing you accomplish, makes it easier for those who come after you. You are breaking generational patterns, healing family wounds, transforming collective shadows. The trauma stops with you. The unconsciousness ends with you. The patterns of avoidance, denial, projection that have been passed down through generations of your family line are being transformed through your willingness to face what they could not face, feel what they could not feel, heal what they could not heal. This is sacred work, ancestral work, work that serves not just your own liberation, but the liberation of your entire lineage, past and future. Work that contributes to the healing of the world. Work that honors both where you came from and where you're going. You are the answer to your ancestors' prayers, the fulfillment of their hopes for someone in the line who would finally break free from the patterns that bound them, the living proof that healing is possible, growth is achievable, transformation is real. Chapter 20. The Return to Love. After all the shadow work and integration and facing of difficult truths, you might wonder where love fits into this journey. You might fear that becoming conscious of your complexity will make you harder, more cynical, less capable of the open-hearted love that makes life beautiful. But the opposite is true. The love you're returning to is not the naive love of before you knew your own darkness. It's not the conditional love that depends on others being who you need them to be. It's not the desperate love that seeks to complete what feels incomplete within you. This is conscious love, love that includes your shadow and theirs, love that doesn't need to fix or change or improve anyone, love that can hold both the beauty and the brokenness, the light and the darkness, the joy and the sorrow of being human. Love that is not blind, but sees clearly and chooses to love anyway. When you stop trying to be perfect, you become capable of loving imperfection. When you accept your own humanity fully, you can accept others' humanity without needing them to be different. When you make peace with your own contradictions, you stop needing others to be consistent to earn your love. This love is not soft or weak or sentimental. It's fierce and strong and discerning. It knows when to hold and when to release, when to support and when to challenge, when to stay and when to go. It's love that serves growth rather than comfort, truth rather than illusion, authenticity rather than performance. You learn to love yourself, not despite your flaws, but because of your wholeness, which includes your flaws. You learn to love others, not for their perfection, but for their humanity, which includes their imperfection. You learn to love life, not for its ease, but for its fullness, which includes its difficulty. This love extends beyond personal relationships to embrace your connection with all of existence. You begin to feel kinship with the trees, the stars, with the struggles of strangers, with the whole magnificent, terrible, beautiful dance of life on this planet. You realize that love is not something you fall into or out of, but something you are, something you're made of, something you can never actually lose. The journey inward leads not to isolation, but to connection, not to selfishness, but to service, not to withdrawal from the world, but to deeper engagement with it. Because when you know who you really are, you can give from fullness rather than emptiness, from choice rather than compulsion, from love rather than need. This is the love that changes the world, not through grand gestures or perfect actions, but through the simple act of being present to what is, accepting what cannot be changed, and working to transform what can be transformed. Through the radical act of loving yourself and others exactly as you are, while remaining committed to growth. You came into this world as love, and you will leave as love. Everything in between is just learning to remember what you never actually forgot, but thought you had to earn, achieve, or become worthy of. Love is your nature. Love is your purpose. Love is your home. Chapter 21. The Eternal Return. The journey of individuation never truly ends. It spirals ever deeper, each cycle taking you further into the mystery of who you are. Each return to familiar territory, revealing new layers of understanding. You are not climbing a mountain toward a final peak, but dancing in ever-widening circles around the fire of your own becoming. What you thought was linear progress reveals itself to be cyclical return. The issues you believed you had resolved resurface at deeper levels. The patterns you thought you had transcended appear again with more subtlety. The wounds you believed you had healed ask for deeper healing. This is not failure. This is the nature of the spiral path. Each time you encounter a familiar challenge, you meet it with more wisdom, more compassion, more skill. The relationship that triggers your abandonment wound now becomes an opportunity to practice staying present with your fear rather than running away. The work situation that activates your authority issues becomes a chance to speak your truth with both courage and discernment. You are not the same person who started this journey, even though you might face some of the same struggles. You have more capacity now to hold difficulty without being overwhelmed by it. More ability to stay present with pain. without being consumed by it. More skill at distinguishing between what is yours to carry and what belongs to others. The healing that has taken place in you ripples out in ways you may never fully know. The child who encounters you now meets someone more integrated than they would have met before your journey. The colleague who works with you benefits from your increased emotional intelligence. The friend who talks with you receives the gift of your deeper listening. You have become what depth psychology calls a wounded healer, someone who has transformed their own pain into wisdom and can therefore companion others on their journey without trying to fix them or take away their necessary struggles. Your scars have become sources of light. Your breaks have become places where love can enter. But the work continues, not because you're broken or incomplete, but because you're alive. Because consciousness is always evolving, always discovering new depths, always finding new ways to express itself through the unique vessel of your individual life. Because the mystery of existence is inexhaustible, and you are part of that mystery. The difference now is that you're no longer doing this work from a place of desperately trying to fix yourself. You're doing it from a place of curious exploration, of service to life, of commitment to growth, not as self-improvement, but as participation in the larger evolution of consciousness itself. You understand now that you are both the journey and the destination, both the seeker and the sought, both the question and the answer. The individuation you've been seeking has been happening all along through every struggle and insight, every breakdown and breakthrough, every moment of despair and glimpse of grace. The return is not to where you started, but to who you've always been beneath all the layers of conditioning, trauma, and unconsciousness. You are coming home to yourself again and again, each time more fully, each time more consciously, each time with greater appreciation for the magnificent complexity of being human, closing the dawn light as this long night of the soul draws toward its close. You find yourself changed, not fixed or finished or perfected, but changed, more whole, more real, more alive to the full spectrum of your humanity. The parts of yourself you've been running from have become the parts you're learning to embrace. The shadow you feared would destroy you has become a source of power. The wounds you thought would break you have become sources of wisdom. The complexity you tried to simplify has become the richness that makes your life meaningful. You are more yourself than you have ever been, and yourself turns out to be more beautiful than you ever imagined. The sun is beginning to rise on a new day in your life. Not a day without challenges or pain or uncertainty, but a day faced by someone who knows they can meet whatever comes with presence and courage and compassion. Someone who has learned to be a friend to themselves, an ally to their own growth, a loving parent to their own becoming. You carry within you now the wisdom of the night, the knowledge that darkness is not your enemy, but your teacher. That descent is often the path to ascent, that what you're most afraid of often contains what you most need, that the way forward is often the way through, not around. As you step into this new chapter of your existence, you do so not alone, but accompanied by all the parts of yourself you've reclaimed, all the ancestors whose wisdom flows through you, all the future generations who will benefit from the healing work you've done. You are part of a story larger than your individual life, a healing that extends beyond your personal wounds. The journey continues, but you are no longer the same traveler who began this voyage. You have become someone who can trust the process, embrace the paradox, dance with the uncertainty, and love with an open heart, even in a world that is often difficult and confusing and painful. The night has been long, but it has been holy. The darkness has been deep, but it has been fertile. The journey has been difficult, but it has been transformative. You have descended into the underworld of your own psyche and returned with treasures, self-knowledge, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and the recognition that you are both human and divine, both finite and infinite, both individual and part of the whole. Rest now in the growing light. Feel the warmth of this new dawn on your face. Know that you have done something sacred. You have chosen consciousness over unconsciousness, love over fear, truth over illusion, wholeness over fragmentation. You have kept faith with your own becoming. The path continues, spiraling ever deeper into the mystery of what it means to be fully human. But you walk it now with different eyes, a more open heart, and the profound understanding that the journey itself is the destination, the seeking itself is the finding, the longing itself is the love you've been longing for. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome to the rest of your beautifully human, endlessly mysterious, completely perfect, imperfect life.